Hi, my name is Christopher Dunn. I'm an attorney, but mostly I've been working on a discovery that I want to talk to you about today and introduce you to. I'm not Russell Brand, so I'm not going to be waving my arms up and showing off my tattoos. I'm not trying to entertain in this video. In fact, it's a little uncomfortable and I'm trying to get used to the media. Mostly I've been writing books, and my partner Kathy has been writing books and illustrating books to get a message out. And this short video won't really be able to tell you much about the message, but hopefully it'll give you a little bit of a sense for who I am and what we're doing together and why we're sharing with you and what we believe you will benefit from and what we need you for. So that's a little bit about myself. Now I'm going to just pull this whiteboard over and begin a tiny bit. This video is short, I don't want it to be long. Essentially, the discovery that we're going to talk about, that we've written about, has to do with functional common denominators. I start with one of the hardest things about this, because if I talk and talk and talk about this whole thing in an easier way, you might lose sight of the fact that this is really what it's all about. It's about functional common denominators. And that's a hard concept, really hard concept, and I understand that. Aligning, linking, thinking, responding, sensing, these are functions, okay? Now, to explain this whole thing takes a lot. And, one of the tools that we have for explaining something complicated is a book. It's called Creating Harmony. We didn't start out with this book. We started out with a very thin book called The Anatomy of Our Behavior. And we rewrote and rewrote and rewrote over a period of years. Now, it started in law school. It was a legal framework about how to create balanced policies that led to a message for the general public. That message developed over several years, and let me turn this around. And it got really complicated, but on some level it's really very simple and straightforward. The simple message, right, is that there are parts to, what's that to? To wholeness, to harmony, to balance, to getting along, to order or organization. There are parts to it that we can divine from nature. And of course, I use the word divine. In my case, it came from a very spiritual place, came from a faith-based place. That's what led me to even do this, to even find this, to even discover this. Now, I use the word discover purposely. It's not an invention. It's not a perspective, a way of looking at it, the world. It's not a subjective view of things. It's objective. And the reason I can say that is because the human body is objective. It's an objective model. It's an object, right? It's made of parts. And those parts come together and they serve functions. We generally think of the heart as functioning as a pump, a link. We think of the brain as functioning for thinking and processing. We think of the nerves as functioning to responding. We don't think about being responsive as actually functioning in the same way, responding. We don't necessarily think about senses. We know that they serve the function of sensing, but we don't necessarily think that being sensitive, a behavior, functions the same way. It's sensing. Being sensitive, we're sensing in a good way. Okay? Insensitive, we're sensing in a bad way. Unresponsive, we're not responding well. Thoughtless, we're not thinking or processing well. Thoughtful, we're processing and thinking well. Okay. If it's true that we can actually divine or discover parts to some whole that we might call wholeness, we might call harmony, we might call balance, we can figure out what that word of the total of these parts is. It's kind of hard because we We have notions of what these words mean, balance, harmony. We might have preconceived ideas of what they mean. So when we put that as a label for this concept, it might not feel comfortable because we might already be thinking of those words in different terms. What's most important, though, is to realize if it's true that there are parts to this ideal, this order of sorts, there are parts to that mimic the functions of the body, then what we have is a discovery of a law of nature. And we can use scientific method to establish that. We can use logic to assess it in an objective way. So this is a big deal, and it's really complicated. There's more to it than just what I've said. And you might say to yourself, well, why haven't I heard of this from the mainstream? Why haven't I heard of this yet in the public? Aren't you doing radio shows? Have you been interviewed on TV? Has Oprah picked up your book? And the answer is no. Not yet. Not yet. That's the answer. Why is that? Well, first of all, if you're mostly a discoverer and not really a writer, that's not your thing. You're not necessarily looking to write, but you had this path for whatever reason. In my case, it was a calling. In Kathy's case, it's a calling. Why did we come to do it? We came to do it because we cared about some sort of goal that we call a more loving world, right? So we cared about our faith and to live the first and second commandments. So in that process, we were led to this amazing place, an amazing journey. Can you imagine two people? You can just imagine pretty normal backgrounds, maybe blessed in some ways, but not like we were raised by famous people or anything like that, right? Can you imagine coming to a point where you write a number of books together over a period of years that explain, as you would expect, right? We're talking about a discovery of a law of nature. You might expect that in order for you to assert that, you better be able to show it, right? So we had to write a lot to show that it really is a discovery of a law of nature. And we were blessed to be able to do that. We have dozens of books for adults. But we didn't want just to reach adults with this amazing message. And of course, you can kind of sense that there's a character element here, right? Because you're hearing things like being loving, being thoughtful, being responsive, being sensitive. At first, we weren't thinking character for children. But over time, we started to write for children and draw for children. And the first book was just a book, What You Can Be, about a bee called the You Can Bee. It was just a simple idea that you can be anything you want to be, okay? And that led to another book a few months later called You Could Do Kangaroo, with a message, you can do anything you set your heart to do. And then You Could Fly Butterfly and Save the World Dog and the Yucadoo Crew. And that led to a whole host of other children's books that help to bring children, in a very loving way, this message. And, it's complicated, right? I mean, it's not simple when you start talking parts to a whole, right? It's not simple. So you have to start to develop materials to teach it. And that's what we did over a period of years. Parts to an individual whole, parts to a societal or an organizational whole, okay? We had to create the marketing materials to help explain it. A world-changing discovery, parts to wholeness, okay? That has a subjective sound to it. I understand that. It does. We have been sold so many times in so many different ways. The 7 keys, the 8 secrets, the 9-fold, etc., the 8-fold path, right? We've seen all that. This is the first time anybody is asserting that there are parts that are objectively identifiable that we can mimic. So it's an objective model. Now, it's not the first time in history that anybody has thought that the body is a model for order. There have been people in history that have said that. They had the alignments wrong. We won't go into that here, but just understand, we're not the first to ever say it. We're just the first to ever say that there's a functional common denominator. And that's important because this is the discovery of a systems law. And there are people who talk about, wouldn't it be great if we could discover a systems law? Well, we think we have discovered one. And we do need help. We need your help to embrace this, to even look at it and understand it and realize that God has actually given us a gift. God has given us a gift of a recipe in nature for us to use to help us fulfill the first and second commandments. It's a big claim, I understand that. And I would feel, when I first would start telling people that, and had no books to explain it, just started, let's try to get it down on paper so people can understand, I might feel a little funny saying to somebody, hey, look at this great thing, look at this amazing discovery. But, you know, I don't feel as badly saying it when we have a dozen books that explain it for all sorts of different reasons and all sorts of different purposes. And I certainly don't feel as bad saying it when we have more than 30 books in a series for children. And I'll mention just a second. I'll mention this crew. This is Save the World Dog and the Yucadu crew, right? Because we talked about them a little bit. You know, we really believe that we've got to share with children how this discovery works so that we can really change the world, so we can change the way we do things. Right now we're sort of chaotic and disordered because we haven't discovered there's a recipe and an order for creating order. So what I want to do is just invite you to look at the materials that we have that go with this, some of the flyers, some of the books, and dialogue with us. Talk to us about what you might be able to do, what you might be able to bring to the table to help us bring this out. Because we're just two people. We're just two people with a calling and a passion who have done some pretty unusual things, let's face it, right? But we're not there yet. We really want the world to understand what this is and how it benefits them and how it's been beneficial to our lives. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope to have more opportunity to talk to you and talk with you, and thank you again.